Hi, algebra class. Today we're going to continue our study of slopes of lines, and we learned yesterday about point slope form, slope intercept form, standard form, how to change in between the two. You always the change in y over the change in x, the change in the height over the change in the length. That's how you get the slope of lines. So today we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular lines, and I want you all to notice. I want you to notice something really specific about what the slope of a parallel line is. Of course, you know that any parallel line looks like an equal sign. And in this case, the slope of the original line A to B is up 1 over 2. So I'm going to pick any corner and I'm going to count up 1 over 2, height 1, width 2 to get me to that next line. So the slope of this line is 1/2. Also notice that the slope of this line is exactly the same. The equation's different because the y-intercept is different, but the slope is identical. Now I want you to notice what the slope of a perpendicular line looks like. Same slope from A to B is 1/2, up 1 over 2, but I want you to notice, I'm going to point this out. The reciprocal of our slope from A to B. So if we flip our width and our height, so if we put the width on top and the height on the bottom to get a new height and width, the reciprocal is 2 over 1, which this reciprocal, or this slope, not reciprocal, but this slope of our new line is negative 2 over 1. You'll notice in every perpendicular line that the new slope is the reciprocal of the original slope and its opposite sign. So if it started as a negative, it's going to become a positive. If it started as a positive, in this case, it's going to turn into a negative slope so that these lines can cross at some point. So what does this mean when you just have numbers, like in our examples yesterday? So they've given us an equation in slope-intercept form, and it gives us the ordered pair. This is where it passes through, the line passes through. On the graph, you would plot the point -4 on the x and 2 on the y. Not each, but you would plot this. And then the equation for it is, the slope-intercept form equation is y equals 3x minus 5. The question is, identify the slope of this line. So the slope of the line with the equation y equals 3x minus 5. You know in our studies that the slope is always with the x. So you know the slope is 3. Your answer is always the parallel line, the parallel equation for this point is still going to have a 3 with the x. It's still going to have a 3 with it because the slope doesn't change. But then you have to determine what your new equation is with these given points. And all you're going to do is plug and play like you did yesterday. Remember this equation? This is point slope form. This is what you're going to use. You know the slope is 3. You know x is -4, and you know y is 2. So now we just need a new equation that looks like this with the same slope, but your y-intercept is going to change. So we just plug and play, and then it's basic algebra. Y minus 2 equals 3 times x minus -4. And now we just calculate. Y minus 2 equals 3, x plus 4, because a double negative equals a positive. You have to simplify it. And then you distribute your 3. Y minus 2 equals 3x plus 12. And of course, you have to add 2 to each side because y has to be by itself. And this is a -2. So your new equation is, your parallel equation for this equation is y equals 3x plus 14. So now I want you to try it. I want you to pause the video and I want you to try to determine what the new equation is given one equation and given 2 different points. All right, so in this equation, they want to know what would be a parallel equation for this line. And you should identify that this is the slope you're going to use in M, this is the X, and this is the Y. Plug these numbers into your point slope equation. Y minus Y1 equals M times X minus X1. Plug it into that equation, and then I want you to try to determine it. And they've kind of given you a start down here. They've given you a start down here. Use your resources. Pause the video before I show you the answer. See if you can determine it on your own. All right, let's go ahead and check your answer. You should have determined that you're going to substitute for point slope form. You're going to substitute your -2, that was your y1, and your, I'm sorry, not -2, 2 for your y1, and 8 for your y2, and 1/2 was your slope. You're going to substitute those numbers, and then you're going to distribute your half. So 1/2 times x is 1/2 x, and half of -8 is -4. And finally, to get your simplified answer, you have to add 2 to both sides because this is a -2. Add 2 to the side. So your parallel equation to your original, to this original equation, your parallel equation to this is y equals 1/2 x minus 2. Hopefully you got that one right. Okay, final example here. Now we're going to talk about perpendicular lines. And hopefully you remember from the beginning of the video that if you want a perpendicular line to this slope, or to this equation, which this equation's in standard form, so you're going to have to do some adjusting to get it into slope-intercept form. So you need to identify the slope. It's not giving you a slope, so you have to identify the slope. This is standard form. We did this yesterday. We practiced with this yesterday. We need something to get it into slope-intercept form. To determine the slope, it needs to be y equals at the end. So you're going to do some moving around. X moves to the other side, so you have to subtract 3x from each side. Your new equation is 2y equals -3x plus 12. Kind of move these around so that you have your y-intercept at the end. Of course, you can't have a variable with a y, so you have to divide by 2. You have to divide both of these by 2 to get your y equals -3/2 x plus 6. Your slope of this line, is -3/2 x. Now you want to determine a perpendicular line for this equation. Hopefully you remember that perpendicular is the reciprocal of the slope and the opposite sign. So the reciprocal and the opposite sign, the perpendicular slope to this is 2/3, positive 2/3. And then you just plug it into that equation, point slope equation, y minus y1 equals slope times x minus x1. So let's see how they do that. You have a new slope. All right, so you just plug and play. Your y minus y1 is -2 equals 2/3. Here's your perpendicular slope, x minus x1, which x1 is 1. 1 and -2, and your slope is 2/3. So we've identified that. And now you just do algebra. You calculate it. Simplify y double negatives plus 2 equals 2/3 x minus 1. Distribute y plus 2 equals 2/3 x minus 2/3, because -1 times 2/3 is -2/3. Now you have to get rid of the 2 from both sides, so you're going to subtract the 2. Y equals -2/3 x. And if you have to have a common denominator, which is of course going to be thirds, so it's 6/3. -2/3 minus 6/3 is 8/3. You could also just put the 2 in front of your 2/3 because this is -2 and 2/3. Either one is correct. Now you're going to try it. So I hope you understand that you never know what form they're going to give you in the equation. So you have to be able to adjust. standard form to slope-intercept form, slope-intercept form to point-slope form, point-slope form to standard form. We practiced that yesterday. Hopefully, you've gotten some practice. The quizzes is going to give you more practice, but we need to practice creating the equations in a different way. All right, so now you try it. They want to know what is the perpendicular line of 3 and -1 given whatever this slope is. Of course, this is in standard form, so you need to convert standard form to slope-intercept form. I want you to pause the video and see if you can calculate how to do standard form to slope-intercept form. Okay, after your calculations, you should have determined that your slope of this equation is 5/2. And then the reciprocal or the perpendicular line is, of course, the reciprocal of 5/2, and it's the opposite sign. So your slope of this line is -2/5. Now I want you to determine the new equation. The perpendicular line, given the points above, given these 2 points above, given 3 and -1 with a slope of -2/5. 3 and -1, 3 is your x, -1 is your y, and your perpendicular slope is -2/5. I'm going to write that down here so that you can do your equations. So x is 3, y is -1, and m is -2/5. So pause the video, put it into y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, put it in point slope form or point slope form, and see if you can determine what your answer is. All right, hopefully you determined that it was C. The most common mistake is the y minus -1. You should have simplified that to y plus 1. That's the most common mistake that people make. Just make sure that you keep the operation and you keep the sign that goes with it. Be sure to go back to those quizzes. There's 3 different quizzes. You have to choose 2 equations from each quizzes, and you have to show all of your work and how you determined what your answer is. Of course, quizzes is going to give you the correct answer, so you can always go back to see what you did wrong and where you did it, but I need to see all of your work. Yes, it's for a grade. You should have 3 equations, 2 from each type of quizzes.